Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of the Crypto Coins News Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Medor. Today is May 29th, 2015. The current price of Bitcoin is roughly $235.50 with a 24-hour high of $236.80. In the news, just a quick update on the Roger Ver OKCoin controversy. OKCoin has claimed to have proven that they did not forge any signatures. See the video in the show notes for more information. CCN is presently conducting a deeper investigation into the matter, and if we come up with any interesting results, we'll surely deliver them soon. For today's show, I spoke with Jonah Dorman and Alan Shinners, two individuals deeply connected to GAW miners, who are presently rallying for a lawsuit against Josh Garza, the shamed former CEO of the one-time mining hardware producer, GAW Miners, who was rumored to have run to Dubai to avoid prosecution in the United States. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy the interview. On the line here with Alan Shinners and Jonah Dorman. You guys were heavily involved with Josh Garza. Can you tell us a little bit about your involvement?
I think it's pretty public knowledge at this point. I was the general manager of GAW Miners. I was brought on board due to the technology created by LeaseRig that allowed for actual separation, logical separation of miners, where we could take a physical miner and split it into various smaller parts for leasing, rentals, or things like hashlets. And then later, after Garza allegedly fled the country, I became the interim CEO while he was still apparently the acting CEO.
And Alan?
I was one of the original investors in hashlets when they first were rolled out. Over time, I became highly active in the original Hash Talk forum, along with another 18 or so people. Eventually became high visibility Hash Talk forum leaders, I guess, for lack of a better definition. But primarily, I was initially I came on as a normal investor, buying hashlets and building a portfolio.
Jonah, you said allegedly fled the country.
There's also evidence that's been posted based on the leaked emails that he initially went to Belgium prior to going to Dubai. I don't have any of that information myself. I can't actually factually verify it. I do know other people who can, but I still like to use the term allegedly.
I know he was a bad businessman, but what would he face prosecution for?
Well, I can answer part of that from a consumer point of view. I think that it became, midway through the process, it became obvious that the hashlets really had no hardware directly associated with them. And one could, allegedly, there was an oversubscription to hashlets, much more so than there was hardware to back them up. So
to me, sold more hardware than there was.
Well, in a lot of sense, when you look at it from a business point of view, it appeared that hashlets really became more akin to shares of a corporation or an operation than they did physical hardware or something associated with physical hardware that was more tangible than that. When you're using the proceeds of hashlet sales to fund further advancement or expansion of your business model, it could be defined as, or they could be defined as shares of a corporation or private shares, private placement, which if it had been solely within a well-defined group, insiders only, then it would not have caught the attention of the SEC. But because it involved anyone willing to purchase hashlets around the world, that is a violation of securities laws as far as IPOs. And some of the documents that were leaked over the last few months, the use of the term prospectus is one obligation that companies must fulfill in order to properly educate prospective investors in the placement itself when you're dealing with securities. That, however, was not the case with general consumers through GAW miners, through eventually ZenCloud, the sale of hashlets in ZenCloud, through the VARs, the value-added resellers, There was no real prospectus. In other words, they avoided the use of the term investment to skirt any prospective securities violations. This was pre-planned. I mean, they did not want this to be perceived as a security in violation of standing U.S. law. And
okay, so I remember them supposedly receiving a subpoena for all of their internal emails at GAW. What I want to know is, had they filed charges when Garza left for Belgium, Dubai, wherever?
No, they had not filed any. No organization that I'm aware of had filed charges, and actually to this point, I don't know of a U.S. organization that has filed charges.
And I have
when he
backed
left
that up, yeah.
A few days after he left for Belgium, a subpoena did arrive from the SEC. The envelope was open by the time I saw it. However, I did see and read it. It was beginning of February, some point in time.
Dubai wanted him, and that's because there's investors from Dubai, I assume?
Yes, there were a small group of investors who, and again, the email breaches well supported this. There were a small group of investors there who had spent invested roughly a little over $2 million in the GAW enterprise, and it had been done through Carlos mostly. The emails show this history with these investors in Dubai. So they were they were into quite a bit of capital went into GAW from them alone.
So why would he go there if he knew that they wanted him?
From what the network is indicating, indirectly, directly, it was more, I think, more plain. Originally, before it was obvious that the entire enterprise, Hashless, Paycoin, all of this was indeed an alleged scam. Before that became evident to everybody, there was still very positive relations being fostered between Garza and the UAE investor group, including the head of that investor group. So it wasn't until a bit later, and he had already been there once before. And the emails, again, support that he had already visited the main representative of that investment group there, had visited them, had met with the family members and the like. So it was later, when the red flags were coming up very prolifically, that the UAE investors realized that they weren't going to see any of this money back. And since there was already a private discussion, between possibly Dave McClain and Garza about maybe relocating outside of the United States to avoid some of the prospective legal problems that Garza and GAW would be facing. I think that Garza, having already been to Dubai, saw that it's a very nice place. It's a very diverse community there. It's very pro-business, pro-Western. And I think the investors over there, even much later, continued the deception that he would be welcome there. And I think that their purpose was to get him into the country to eventually prosecute him for either alleged fraud or financial negligence. So that is how that, I believe, from what I understand, that is how that developed.
So has Garza continued to start new businesses since the Paycoin gambit really failed?
Well, it seems that the crypto private investor group was the last one that I heard of.
What is your feelings on what the future of Josh Garza looks like? I mean, it seems like he tried to run to Dubai. From what I understand, he used the help of the U.S. consulate to escape UAE authorities, and now he's back in the United States. He's in Texas, which obviously the wheels of justice in America move a lot slower, especially when when it's related to securities violations. It can take a long time, but do you think that he'll try to flee again?
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't seem to me, based on everything that I've heard, again from this mysterious network that Alan is mentioning, it doesn't appear to me that he has a lot of assets being stored in the U.S. It seems like he has them outside of the U.S. And there is all of the numbers that have been looked at. There are some pretty gaping holes in the numbers that would indicate that he has some money somewhere, but that he doesn't really want to touch it for fear of the government seeing it or people being able to recover it. So my guess would be that he would definitely be fleeing the U.S. and not staying. I mean, he already left once, so I would assume he'll leave again and try to make it to some other country if he still has a passport, or if anyone can charter him a private flight.
Like you said, you were the general manager and you were the interim CEO the first time he just up and left the country. And he still owes you money personally, right?
Yeah, he owes myself and actually most employees money for promises of equity, which is what was our primary pay was in equity, not in cash.
You must have believed in the very beginning that the company was solid, that they were there to stay.
Yeah, there was enough evidence at the time that the company was producing income and could produce income, and there was a lot of evidence. And again, the only thing that really kept anybody even working there, especially anybody higher up, was the involvement of Cantor Fitzgerald and the involvement of Stuart Fraser. And with that backing in place, even if Garza was a complete idiot, Cantor backing the company, there was enough evidence that it could be a success. And a lot of the ideas in the meetings that happened with Cantor gave a lot of light to, this could actually bring crypto mainstream. It could bring it to a major U.S. corporation.
Stuart Fraser, through the leaked emails that I've read, he seems to be very, very naive about cryptocurrency and about the way that things were actually going. He doesn't seem like a co-conspirator. He seems more like a victim.
I mean, I could say that's possible. I just don't know his personal level of involvement with Garza. So if he is naive, I mean, throwing his firm's name and his name behind something really doesn't contribute much. I mean, you would think if you're going to throw your name around, or you're going to throw the name of Cantor Fitzgerald around, in relation to a small startup company, just because some guy who moved up from Texas and started a computer company, you would think you would put a little bit of research into it and you would actually know. And if he didn't know the financials, he didn't know what was going on, I would think that anybody in his position would feel uncomfortable doing such things.
Right. So you're saying you don't agree with what I said. You don't think that that's likely, at least.
I think that if it is true, it is gross negligence on his part in his position.
And I have to agree with that.
I can see how you guys would feel that way. For CCN listeners, do you think that at the very least, the chances of Garza, what would you say the chances of him actually succeeding in another one in the future? Because I mean, he's going to be the kind of man he is, no matter where he is or what he's doing. But it would be nice to have less things in cryptocurrency that sort of drag in new people and then burn them, and then many of them will never want anything to do with cryptocurrency again. What do you guys think? Do you think he'll keep, do you think he's obsessed with this niche, or that he'll move on to some other community to try and rope into something?
I don't think he's mentally capable of keeping himself out of the spotlight long enough to have anything be successful. And anything that has his name attached to it now involving crypto definitely won't be a success, because it'll only take a few seconds on Google for anybody to find out what he's done in the past. I mean, it's not like his broadband company. When you start searching for it, you find sort of a mixture of reviews, and you see Stewart's name behind it, or you used to, and some other things. That company, there's a lot of horror stories about it, but most of them are buried. As far as crypto goes, anything that you look for in crypto, you'll find out what Josh has done or allegedly done fairly quickly and easily. So I can't see him being a success or even being behind anything that's a success.
And I think there are a number of conditions here that will preclude him ever being able to form a viable crypto-based business model anytime in the future. One, his idea factory, the very medium that he was utilizing to get business ideas, is now fairly disintegrated, which is Hash Talk, the original Hash Talk. The numbers of membership are just really low now, and it was the larger original community that was the idea generator for much of what he wanted to pursue in the crypto industry. I think that the other hurdle that he will never be able to overcome is as Jonah has already stated, anything that is associated with the Garza name is going to be deemed toxic. And we have seen this now as a recent iteration, more so with BTC.com and how that was handled. I think that it's pretty safe to say that Garza's days in the crypto industry on any meaningful level are over.
So you, Alan, you and some others are levying a lawsuit at Garza. Is that correct?
Yes. The group has been open now for we're just a few days shy of 2 months. We have over 300, and it may be now closer to 400. The total amount at right now, I still have to add about 100 other people that have filled in the forms. I have to vet some of these out yet. But we are already over $7.5 million. And the other 100 will also include some fairly large investors still. Right now we have 3 out of 10 of the top 10 on the original ZenCloud top 10 list that are part of this group. And I think that probably we will breach the $8.5 million level by this weekend.
So that's all people's losses combined, which is a fair sum of money.
That's only the people that have come forward so far to date.
Right.
It's not anywhere close to everyone. And you have to imagine there's a lot of people with smaller accounts that don't feel it's good to come forward. There's been a lot of disinformation and misinformation. There's been some pretty clear Garza-led campaigns to basically say that this lawsuit will be a class action where you'll get pennies on the dollar and there's no point in participating, et cetera, et cetera. And Alan, if you want to comment on that class action thing and the lawyers taking the majority of the cut and all that was going around, that might be good. But there's a lot of disinformation around it, and the numbers Alan's giving are clearly not an indicator of the total amounts that could have been absconded with. I mean, even if you consider expenses after $8 million, that's still a lot of money that could have gone away, but that's nowhere near the totals.
The reason why we did not, or the reason why I was convinced that we should not pursue it as a class action is exactly what the attorneys said. The attorneys are already involved in a large crypto-based, what started as a class action lawsuit and has been relegated to a group lawsuit. And the rationale behind that was this. In a class action lawsuit, as most of us have already experienced in other areas of consumer fraud or negligence, the litigants themselves generally end up with less than 30%. In group lawsuits, the retainer is set and the percentage of the actual award is rather small compared to class action lawsuits because you're not involving 20, 30, 40 attorneys like you would in a class action lawsuit. Since this occurred in the United States, the attorneys in the United States, they have crypto background. They're very cognizant of the Goss story. It was deemed far more beneficial to the litigants to pursue it as a group. However, I don't think that they really believed that we would get past, the original 50, litigants I thought we might reach in the group. I think that, they're very shocked by the number of people that have been willing to come forward and join the group, basically telling the crypto industry that fraud is no longer going to be accepted as a standard any longer. And this is a statement. This is a definitive statement to the crypto industry that anybody out there that is perpetrating a fraud or continuing to perpetrate fraud, their day is coming. Their day of reckoning is coming. And I hope that this lawsuit will be a shining example.
I think it's almost irrelevant. You've already lost the money, whether you get it back or not. If a judgment is given against Garza, that's a net positive, even if it mostly went to the attorneys. But it sounds like you found a situation that will avoid that. So, is there anything else you guys wanted to tell our listeners?
I kind of want to reiterate what you just said, and I get yelled at for this all the time when I do. comparisons, but I mean, somebody basically comes to you and takes money from you, makes promises that are not fulfilled, claims backing of people who aren't actually backing something, intentional misrepresentation and fraud. It's someone stealing something from you. So imagine something very precious to yourself, whether it is your wealth, whether it is your family, whether it's, your children or your wife. If somebody comes up and they take that from you, the idea of just move on, it's over, really doesn't do much to prevent someone from doing the exact same thing in the future. And this is kind of the purpose that Alan is saying, even if there is no money to recover in the lawsuit, which there's a lot of evidence that there is money to recover, even if there's not, it's worthwhile to join the suit and to just put up a stand to say, look, there's been enough scams in the crypto industry. It's time that every time someone gets scammed, we go after the person who's doing it.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the CCN podcast. Again, I'm your host, Paul Medore. Tune in next week for my interview with the Let's Talk Bitcoin host, John Barrett of Bitcoins and Gravy. This podcast is released every Wednesday and Friday. For up-to-date cryptocurrency news, always check ccn.la first.